right, welcome back to Indomitable Conversations, our ongoing series dedicated to exploring the incredible stories of resilience and overcoming the foster care system. I'm Ciruolo, author of Indomitable, a foster care story, and I am genuinely thrilled to have you here with us again for our fifth session. Today, we continue our exploration of the indomitable spirit that resides within those who have navigated the foster care system. Our guest today brings a unique perspective and an inspiring story that underscores the beauty and strength that can grow from adversity. If you haven't already, please consider picking up a copy of Indomitable, a foster care story. Your support not only fuels my ability to advocate, but also contributes to our collective awareness of improving the foster care system. Thank you for joining us in community, and let's get started. Today's guest speaker is the indomitable Teauania Charles, who is also a former foster care youth. She is a licensed social worker who has dedicated the last 13 years to helping individuals living with mental health challenges and is currently in the process of earning a doctorate in social work. Teauania is the owner of Calliope's Corner, which aims to help Black and Brown people be successful in breaking generational curses related to mental health, financial wellness, and education. I cannot wait to chat with her and have her answer your questions. Yay! Thanks for being here tonight.
Hey, Di.
How's it going? I'm so excited to have you on. I'm so excited to continue our conversation from your podcast. I was just like, oh, when I saw that it was you on the schedule today, I was like, thank God. I am so relieved to have a moment to chat with somebody that like I am just so much more comfortable with, and I don't feel like I have to be like preparing questions.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Okay. But I don't want to assume that the audience knows your story already. So if you could just give us a little rundown of, who you are and what you're working on.
For sure. So my name is Teauania Charles. I am a licensed clinical social worker in 3 states, Kansas, Texas, and Alabama. And I'm working on a few more. I am a private practice owner, and I also am a travel social worker. So I'm trying to put my footprint in anywhere across the world that I can.
Yes.
So.
Yes. So what do travel social workers do?
Yeah, so we just help out wherever the need is.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's hospitals, sometimes that's nursing homes,
Mm-hmm.
correctional facilities. Recently, I did a residential treatment facility, and typically it's about 13 weeks out of the year, and then we move on. So it's basically a nomadic lifestyle with
Mm-hmm.
structure.
I'm just laughing to myself because I'm thinking about our shared opinion on when we should pack when we travel, and I'm just laughing at what that would be like, given those
Can you
circumstances.
imagine?
No, that's what I'm laughing about. I'm just like, okay, well, I'm gonna skip right over that, because neither Teauania nor myself believes that you have to pack too much in advance. So when you travel, as long as all your stuff is there and clean, you're good to go, and it'll only take 5 minutes, right?
Exactly.
All right. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Calliope's Corner. Could you give us a little, background about what it is, why you started it, and what you're doing?
For sure. So, I've been in mental health for about 13 years now, and I constantly found that I was fighting for the leadership roles, or just to. I felt like I was fighting for my place, right?
Yes.
And I was giving to everyone else, but I felt like no one was pouring into me. And so
Mm,
that's where Calliope's Corner was born, because I was like, there's got to be a way that I can reach people from a perspective of understanding and kindness and from the heart that
mm,
doesn't involve the politics of how much can you pay, and what
yeah.
is, if you can't pay, you can't get the service, things like that. And
Right.
so I'm still working on that side, because insurance is a whole different beast of itself.
Yes.
Um, but the fact is that I offer insurance, right?
Yes.
And so that's where Calliope's Corner was, because I also found that there wasn't a lot of people of color providing therapy services. And if they were,
Yes.
it was very based, like modality based, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And while I believe in the modalities, they work for certain people, but they don't work
Mm-hmm.
for everybody in the way that they were created. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of why I decided to create Calliope's Corner.
So I remember that I mean, that wasn't a new issue, but it was definitely exacerbated by the pandemic, right? There was
Mhm.
definitely a lot of folks that needed so much more help than there were sort of resources to provide. Um, what do you think sort of stands in the way in terms of creating those resources for people? What do you think is sort of holding us up if we know we need those resources as communities and we know that we need people offering mental health services? What do you think is holding us up in terms of getting those to people?
That's a great question. But I think there's a multifaceted reason why the services aren't available. It has everything to do with one, we can't get even to the education level of getting to that service, right? Because
Mhm.
let's be honest, it's to be a licensed clinical social worker to provide these services, we have to get through about two different tests.
Mhm.
And the data just came out that people of color are not passing those tests at high rates.
Mm.
So that's one reason is who is passing the test to
Mm,
even get to
yeah,
the clinical level.
right.
So there's that. And I think that's where I mentioned the political piece of it,
Mhm.
because there's
Yeah,
also that funding.
right.
How do we get the funding to offer these services? Because a lot of times people of color can't afford it either,
Right.
because rate of a clinical rate for therapy, individual therapy, couples therapy, group therapy can be anywhere between $100 and $300 for
Yeah,
one session.
yeah,
So I think it has to do with the funding system. It has to do with how to get to licensure.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's
So it's sort of multi-pronged in terms of where the fall down issues are.
for sure, for sure.
What do you think the easiest, I mean, I'm sure you've thought about it. I know you don't have the answers, but, like, I'm sure you've thought about, like, what you would do to push those things through. What kinds of things are we looking at? Like, is it just the fact that the standardized test sucks, or is it more like, are we just not letting people through because we like to gatekeep certain aspects of education?
I think gatekeeping is a huge part of it
Right.
because although the rate or the data is showing that we're not passing them that often, at least on the
Mm,
first try,
right.
I think that the teaching of how to pass it is not there,
Wow. Right.
right?
Right.
So everything to me can be learned.
Mhm.
And so there's so many people who have these skills and techniques and they're not sharing or it
Right.
costs to share, right?
Right.
Like one of the prep services is $295. Who has $295 just for the prep?
Just for prep, right. Oh my goodness.
So I think you kind of asked me a two-part question there,
I do that,
but
yes.
to get back to the first part, what do I think should be done about it? I think that there should be mentorship open and
Yes.
available to
Yes.
social workers, to
Yes.
counselors that doesn't cost money.
Mhm. That's brilliant. Yep. Mentorship, absolutely. Ooh. And it's not even just that because it's like, I think a lot of times what we see, and we see this in DEI as well. So a lot of times what we see is we have problems with not just the gatekeeping, but the standards that we
Mhm.
set off of in terms of mental health and psychology and all of those things are very much based on one type of person, one type of gender, one type of everything. And
Absolutely.
when you sort of set a standard off of that, anything that diverges from that standard it becomes culturally irrelevant, right? Because you're not factoring in all of the issues that are at hand or at stake. So it's almost as if not only are they not letting people of color through, they're not even factoring them into the education. They're not even factoring them into the process. And I think that that's an incredible disservice to everyone, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then even when you think about the boards,
Mm,
there's not many people of
right.
color on the boards now. We are working our way up, I'm not saying that there's no one across the country, but traditionally, the people who put the rules in place were not people of color.
Yes. Yep. That's absolutely right. Well, God help us. So, what I want to talk to you a little bit about is sort of our shared background in the foster care system, given that I have just released this book,
Yes. Yes.
terrifyingly enough. Um, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about, a lot of us will leave the foster care system or leave the system in general and kind of never want to talk about it again. And that's perfectly valid. And I'm not saying that that's not valid. We never want to talk about it again. We never want to think about it again. And we definitely don't want to stand on a platform and say, this was me, this isn't being done. What do you think caused you to look at your experiences and say, no more, this stops with me, I'm going to do something about this?
I think for me, it had to do with seeing so many of my brothers and sisters in the system not make it as well as I did.
Yes.
So I was able to use my experience of abuse because I had unfortunately was one of those who was abused in the system.
Mm,
And I took it as motivation for me to do better, to never become this person, to never have hate towards everybody that comes my way, right? Everybody's not this way because this person did this to me. And but I see so many people who hold on to that, who hold on
mm,
to the idea that I'm not good enough because my abuser told me to, or
mm.
told me that, or I can never be somewhere because my abuser told me that. And that is what motivated me to speak out and say, this doesn't have to be this way. And
Yes.
while I can't change maybe the whole system as it is, but I can
Yes.
touch one person at a time and
Yes.
one child who went through the system at a time and say, you know what, you're bigger than this. You can be
Mhm.
whatever you want to be. And when people tell you that outside of your situation, it's true.
Yes. Yes. Since you do, a little bit more than the average viewer on mental health, will you talk to us a little bit about what kids in the system tend to experience in terms of mental health concerns? And like, you can use me as an example if you want to with my ADHD and all of that. If you need an example, I'll be here for you.
So, a lot of children in the foster care system are battling depression, anxiety, ADHD,
Yes.
a lot of different triggers because of that trauma that was imposed on them just
Yes.
by simply being taken away from their parents, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Every situation is different. Every child
Mhm.
comes into the system differently. And so we can't have the assumption that just because a child's in the system that they had terrible parents.
Yes.
However,
Mm.
there are many who were terrible parents, right?
Yes.
So I think that's also a misconception that we impose on foster children that may not necessarily be true.
Right.
Um, but children, they deal with a lot of mental health issues, and most of the time, yeah, they're put in therapy, but nobody ever tells them what the purpose of it is.
No.
So
Right.
then they go to the medication. But what
Yes.
happens when the medication doesn't work because they're
Right.
either misdiagnosed or, you
Yes.
know.
Yes, absolutely. Or they're experiencing trauma brain and it's looking like ADHD or any of those sorts of things. Then what? Are you
Exactly,
putting that child on Ritalin or are you investigating any avenue of that? What if they can't perform in a school setting like most of us can't? Most of
exactly.
us are just trying to survive. What happens when we can't perform in a school setting? Does a teacher reach out and try to help, or does that teacher kind of pass you along to the next kid? To the next teacher or the next level. It kind of depends, right?
That's a great point too. I actually had a amazing teacher when I first
Yes.
went into the system. Well, it was kinda like a couple years after, but, like, in the thick of it, right?
Mm,
Because, I remember and we kinda talked about this before, but so the foster care system was privatized in about 1995, 1996. And
mhm,
so there was a transition in my services. I went from one agency to another agency who I rarely even saw really. Like
Mhm.
I could not tell you who my social worker was at that point or
And that's true for a lot of us, by the way. That's
yeah.
a very common experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I found like I was doing weekly visits with my mom. She was
Mhm.
supposed to pick me up from school like she always do. And this particular
Mhm.
day she did not come. And I had
Mm.
no idea why. Like I just
Mhm.
knew she didn't come. And so I think it was like a week or two later, I found out she had gotten locked up, and that's her story to tell.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, but my teacher, she was like, I noticed you've been isolating over the last week or whatever.
Mhm.
What's going on? And I
Yes.
remember it to this day. She was like, here's a piece of paper, here's a pencil, let's write your mom a letter.
Mm. That's
And we
so
wrote that
powerful.
letter. And I still remember her to this day. I actually ran back into her a few years ago because we ended up working together.
That's so awesome.
So, yeah.
How did she feel seeing you again and knowing that you'd made it?
I was surprised she recognized me because
Oh, come on now.
she was like, "I know you." She was like, "Your name is Tiana, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "It's so nice to see you again."
Oh,
Yeah, and that was 2nd grade, so, like, what,
yes.
30 years ago?
Yeah, we're not gonna say how long ago it was. Well, nobody's here for that.
So, yeah,
That's
she was
amazing.
excited.
Yeah, I tell people all the time that after parents, teachers are sort of one of the most influential sort of deciders in whether or not you'll make it, right? A
Mhm,
teacher that tells you or teaches you or shows you that you are worthy of love, that you are a human being, has all the power in the world to make sure that you survive, right? And I think that
absolutely,
that is an incredible thing to understand. And I think not enough time there aren't enough circumstances where we are teaching teachers that. Like, there aren't enough situations where we are trying to let them know that. And as I hear myself saying this, I'm also thinking, yes, let's just pile that on top of underpaid, underfunded, and totally disrespected teachers. But the truth is that when somebody doesn't have parents, they are often trying to stabilize themselves
mhm,
off of a safe adult that they see every day. And for better or worse, that can be your teacher. And if you have a good teacher, it can change your life. And if you have a bad teacher, it can go exactly the other way.
mhm,
That's absolutely right. I had good and bad, but mostly good teachers sort of reach out and see me who didn't let me drown. And they're mostly responsible for me being here today. That's absolutely true.
absolutely.
Yes. What do you think sort of one of the biggest misunderstandings about foster care is? And
I
we can make a
think
list. We can sit here and list them.
we can. Um, and I'll probably go on a rant because
Please do. I'll
this
sip
is
this coffee and
something
nod. Yeah.
that came up a while ago on the internet, which
Yes.
is a problem in itself. But but I think it's the biggest misconceptions of the foster care system or the foster kids is that they want to be bad or they want to be a person of misbehavior,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Um, the situation that came up on the internet was that there was a kid who went into the foster care system, and the foster mom was like, she keeps sneaking cell phones, but we're not supposed to allow them to contact anybody from their past.
Right.
That is crazy to me.
Right. Right?
Like, I understand you don't want them to contact their family, but in a world where technology is
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
to completely separate them from the world that they know
Yeah.
is just insane to me.
Just and assume there will be no adverse effects from that pulling somebody out of their life and putting them on another planet.
Exactly, like, they just want their friend. And I
Yes.
remember that happened to us too, but it was a little different because we didn't have technology.
Right, yeah. No, I mean, I knew I couldn't call my grandmother or anything, like, I wasn't allowed to do that, but I would have had to do that on an actual physical, like,
Yeah.
phone, and I wasn't allowed access to a phone, so that still existed back when, T and I were kids, but it
Mhm.
was a little different. We weren't quite connected in the same way
For
at
sure,
those
and I
days.
remember that I still have my best friend though, like, my foster mom
Mm,
would take me to meet with my best friend all the time. So, one of the good foster moms. But
good. Good for her. I was just gonna note that. Good for her, trying to keep your life steady. Good for her.
yeah, but I will have to admit that that was before privatization too.
Mm.
So, I don't know if
Mhm,
that was part of that rule
mhm.
changing situation. But
Yeah.
yeah.
As you know, I feel a little weird about privatization. Sorry to interrupt your rant about misunderstandings here. I have
No.
thoughts and feelings about that issue.
Yeah, and I just think as foster parents, if you have any control over it, we need to try to make sure that they're as normal as possible, even
Yes,
if that means putting parental controls on their phones so that they don't contact specific people or
yes,
whatever. But
yeah,
allowing them to have contact with their friends, allowing them to engage in extracurricular activities, like
yes,
providing a safe space so that they can be regular kids will
yes,
help a lot with behaviors.
yes, absolutely. Would help stabilize, right? Help stabilize behavior, help stabilize their lives, help them
Mhm,
feel like they aren't drowning. I
mhm.
remember, like, just moving from home to home and just, like, trying to stabilize off of my little brother who was nonverbal at the time, and I just remember feeling like, why is nobody looking out for me? Why is nobody watching me? Does this have to do with me? Am I bad? Am I wrong? Am I why I keep getting left in these terrible places? And
Mhm.
we just I was stunned as I got older that anybody felt like they could defend anything that had happened to me. So
Yeah.
I mean, that just yeah,
Yeah.
I
We
was
also have to acknowledge that a lot of these kids are moving home from home to
yes.
home to home,
Yes.
right? So the rules are changing, and you expect
Mhm.
me to come into your house today and know your rules by tomorrow, who is completely different from the rules I had yesterday.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
like, you want me to fold towels a certain way, you want me to
Yeah.
clean a certain way, but my last foster home wanted it spick and span.
Right, and by the way, how many of us ran into foster homes that expected us to clean their house?
Yes.
Like, all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really common tale that I've heard between all of us.
Mhm.
Weirdly, not just for ourselves, very much felt like we were there to be some sort of domestic help, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
also very janky, so something else to consider as we talk about
Mhm.
these things. Anyway, I'm gonna get out of control here if I don't stay on topic. Can't go off on these diatribes, T. All right. So, why do you feel like, and I don't know if this was your experience, but it certainly was mine. Why do you feel like people who aren't involved in the foster care system need to be able to blame kids who are in foster care for the circumstances that they are in? Why do you think they need to feel like the kid was responsible or at least had done something to end up where they were?
That's a good question. And I think it goes back to we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yes.
And they
Right.
don't know our birth parents. They don't know our birth parent situation. They don't
Right.
most of the time know why we're in the system.
Right.
And so I think it goes back to, but I know you.
Mhm.
And a lot of times I know that you have the potential to have some kind of behavior or
Right.
be difficult, which
Right.
that's a whole nother
Right.
thing. But I know what you could be, so it has
Mhm.
to be your fault. Like, you
Right.
had to trigger this.
Right. Right.
And so, I think it goes back to that perception that everything has a reason and you're the common denominator.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. I got a lot of feedback that I wasn't living up to my potential. I got a lot of
Mhm,
feedback that they knew I was smart, but why was I acting this way? And
mhm,
so not only was I dealing with just unbelievable amounts of trauma, I had ADHD. I couldn't cope. And yet
Mm,
it was stunning to me how many adults around me just didn't even realize what was going on with me, but felt very comfortable with giving this feedback kind of with their whole chest to a child pretty regularly.
yeah,
Um, as I age, and now that I am a mother and I have two of my own children, I'm pretty stunned looking back because that's stuff that I wouldn't say to anyone now. And I don't know that times have changed so much since the 90s that things
mhm,
are,
mhm,
more or less okay than they would have been. But I think I'm still very surprised by some of the narratives we see around foster care, especially these days when so many more people are struggling so much harder
yeah,
than they have in decades. So
for sure, for
yeah.
sure.
So I get this feedback a lot, and let me know if you do as well. I love chatting with you about stuff because I feel like I'm like, oh my god, was this you too? Because I'm gonna drown. Um, so I get this a lot where like if I made it out of the system like this, then the system must be doing well, right? Like, definitely good thing the system's doing a good job. And I'm like, they
Yeah,
call it the system. Why would you rather believe the fact that, like, oh, it must be doing a great job versus the fact that I am an exceptional human being? Why
right.
would you know what I mean? Like, what?
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've
Yeah,
heard that before, and a lot of times, yeah, my success, they think, is based on the system,
right,
and the thing is, I didn't age out of the system.
right.
So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think yeah, yeah, that
So, yeah, no, I was having this conversation with somebody a couple of days ago who had also grown up in foster care, and she and I were sort of lamenting the fact that if somebody finds out that you were in foster care, suddenly if they thought you were capable, suddenly they don't anymore. And if
yeah,
they thought that you could do your work on your own, suddenly they don't feel that way anymore. And I thought it was really interesting that you can both be an example of how great the system is and also be so low on the totem pole that like you need to have your work checked. You need to have
mhm,
do you know what I mean?
mhm,
I think that's a stunning sort of juxtaposition in terms of two things that can be true at the same time within people's minds. I love that dual consciousness, you know?
for sure, because, I mean, we're considered the unloved, I would say.
Right, right. Absolutely.
So, no one ever trained you to do anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wasn't like you were living at school in the library just to stay safe or anything, you know? It wasn't like
Right.
you learned more than me. It wasn't like you know what I mean? I think that that's kind of profound when we think about how people must think about the foster care system
Mhm.
by the things that they say out loud, right? Like how
Yeah,
they must be thinking in their mind about things, but like keeping it down based on the things that they will sort of let slip out. I think that's always pretty telling in
yeah,
terms
for
of what they
sure.
must think.
And I think now with social media and the internet and stuff like that, I think now we're getting to a point where they're like, "Okay, we do need more help in the system, but what does that
Yeah,
look like?" Right?
yeah,
It
right.
sucks that it had to be the cost of a couple kids' lives
Of
for that
course.
to happen.
Yes. And that was happening all throughout my childhood, right?
Mhm.
Definitely all throughout the time I have been aware of the system. There would be a child who had there would be a child fatality in the system. There would be a review board, somebody would get fired and nothing would change. And
Right.
that would happen sort of annually, right? That would just happen and happen and happen. And it would come out in the newspaper and everybody would say, oh God, we need to fund the system. Social workers are so overworked. And then it would just like, not even like the news cycle, like literally the
Yeah.
next day you wouldn't hear about it again until the next horrible situation, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You'd see these things. I mean, I've seen these documentaries on Netflix and whatnot, and I'm just sitting here yelling at the television about how many people will just throw their hands up in the air and say, That's not my problem. I didn't deal with that. I don't, oh,
Exactly.
well, and it makes me feel like what we're really saying is that some people's children matter less than others people's children, right?
I agree. I agree.
That we care about, even though we will get on our soapboxes regularly, pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, we're here for the children, we love the children. Oh no, let's not have people have rights because the children. But at the very same time, this will be going on in the deep dark underbelly of the system, right? That these children are just being, I interviewed Rob Shear recently, and he was talking about how um, sort of private, sometimes you can see sort of private foster care companies will be sort of making money off the backs of these terrible situations and off the backs of children. And I just think that that's really a fascinating way of describing it, because you realize that these kids are just becoming fodder for the system, right? They're
Mhm.
going into the system, and then they are being, in a lot of cases, in huge numbers, like 40%, are aging out of the system. And within a year's time, they are being reintroduced to the system by going
Good
into
too.
jails, into penitentiaries, and it just, and the cycle just keeps, it just continues. And it's horrifying to me when we think about how many aspects of this system have been privatized for money, right? And
Absolutely.
for what does that mean for people? What does that mean when we are trying to, maximize profits? What does that mean for children that are being removed from their homes and never checked on? What does it mean if we don't watch these things that we are okay with privatize? What does that, you know what I mean? What does that mean for kids?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think that, you know how they say, that there's a pipeline between schools and jail sometimes?
Yes. Yes.
I think there's a pipeline from foster care to
Yes.
jail as well.
Yes.
Like, and no
Yes.
one really thinks about that because no one talks about it, right? Like,
Yes.
there's a lot of survivors walking among us and no one ever knows because no one ever says anything. This is
Yes.
like like you said at the beginning, this is like our secret life
Mhm.
and no one ever talks about it.
Right. Right. I think I saw an extremely high number, and check me, but I think I saw that, like, people who are in our jail systems are actually, or in our prison systems are actually, like 80% of them have had interactions with the foster care system. Like, it's extremely high.
I
It's not just like, oh, this happened and like, it's not just you're watching Criminal Minds and they mentioned that, like, that kid bounced around in foster care before they became a serial killer. It's extremely high.
believe. Mhm.
um, Anyhow, that's stunning to me. It
Yeah,
it it makes it, I hesitate to go so far as to say it seems on purpose, but it definitely doesn't seem like we are looking to change the
right.
way that this works,
It may
given what
not be
I've
on
seen in my
purpose,
lifetime.
but
Yeah.
it's definitely designed for a reason.
Yes, it's definitely serving its purpose,
Mhm.
for sure. And I think that that's the thing that I find the most horrifying when I hear people sort of, when I'm the first foster kid anybody's ever met, right? When I'm the
Mhm.
first, I used to like to ignore people and, like, be like, oh my God, can we please just talk about something that, like, I actually care about, like my actual interest? Do you want to know what my favorite dinosaur is? But, like, I realized I might be the only foster kid somebody ever meets. And,
Yeah.
like, if I don't make that my burden, then
Who
what?
would?
Then just it'll fall on the next kid behind me. It feels unfair that this
Mhm.
has to be both your burden throughout your life, and then once you age out of the system, it's your responsibility to take care of it, Like, people, when I aged out, people were like, "Oh, are you gonna become a social worker?" And I was like, why? Like, why would I do that? Oh, that's the only thing I can do? Like, I can just you know what I mean? Like, I can just
Interesting.
get back into the system and prop it up for the next generation? Are you serious? Like, it seems as if there's only one, there's only
Route.
one thing you can do after you've been exposed to the system. It's either, fix it or run far away, right? Like, that's all you can do, because people realize how broken it is, right?
Absolutely. And I always say, listen, I did not want to be a social worker. Love my letters now, but social work found me. Like,
Yes.
I hands
Yes.
down believe that
Yeah.
because I first it was a teacher and then I
Mhm.
wanted to be a journalist of some sort.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
I wanted my little Dear Abby column and I
Yes.
would be
Oh my
happy.
god, I would love to give people advice on their, like, on their problems that I don't deal with.
And so, yeah, when I went to well, it started in my bachelor's degree and the first internship I got was as a basically this attendant care worker. I was a glorified babysitter. That's what I was. Attendant care workers are needed. I'm just
Yes.
saying.
Yes. Yes.
But that's kind of where it started. I started seeing kids who were having these medical and mental emergencies
Yes.
because they felt abandoned, alone. And I was like, you
Yes.
know what? I might
Yeah.
be able to do something with
Yes.
this.
Yes.
And
I
that's how it
think
started.
Yeah, I think you look at it from a very different lens when you've experienced it yourself.
For sure.
One of my first internships when I was in college was actually as a child advocate for the Atlanta Child Advocacy Center. And I could not believe they picked me. I was stunned. They had like 20 kids that they had come in. All of them were law students. So they were all like, the job of it was basically to be a junior lawyer or a
Mhm.
paralegal that would be doing the research and everything. And I applied to the job anyway because I was like, this is something I can do. I'm for sure, right? And they talked to me about it and they picked me and I went home sweating. Like I had to tear off the shirt I was wearing because I had sweat through it with anxiety, right? And the fact that they had picked me was so stunning to me. I thought I had seen everything, right?
Mhm.
I thought I had seen everything. I grew up in the Massachusetts foster care system. When I got to Georgia, I did not realize how much more a higher rate of poverty was impacting people and
Oh,
how
for
much
sure.
more just the lack of some of the social programs that Massachusetts is kind of famous for weren't there catching people. And the like the bottom was so much deeper. And it
Absolutely.
stunned me in my early 20s when I was doing this. I remembered a really stunning there was a child that landed on my desk. I got her in a folder. She was 2 years old, and basically she had appeared at the hospital as failure to thrive because her family wasn't feeding her. And somebody had gone, so they had to take a picture of her for the file, and
Mhm.
somebody had gone in and taken a little post-it note and covered all of her baby bits for her dignity. And I sat there and I sobbed. And like people were coming by and they're like, "Di, you're pretty, I'm this in real life." Like people were like, "Are you okay? What's going on?" Like I didn't
Yeah.
have the heart for social work because I knew I felt it so much deeper. It wasn't casual for me. I didn't have that ability to be like, "Oh, these are just kids that I'm responsible for." La la la, carry off on my way.
Right.
I felt it so much differently, and it stunned me what was still carrying on, basically not impacted by current day standards, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I definitely was not strong enough to do child protective services.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but I was like, that's why I am where I am now, getting
Yes.
my
Yes.
doctoral degree, so that
Yes.
way I can impact in a different
In a
way.
different in the way that you can. That's
Yeah,
exactly right. That's exactly what we're all doing. We're only doing the work we can do, impacting the system in a way that we can. Me, obviously, I cannot shut up. Writing a book about it and telling everybody what's under the rug since we seem to all be ignoring the elephant in the living room, that's all I can do. You know what I mean? Like I can't do this bit. I gotta be like, guys, there's a pink elephant over. None of you are gonna look at this elephant. I'm just me. Okay. Anyway, I
but
digress.
we need that too though,
Yes,
right? Like, we
right?
need it all. We need someone in every aspect.
We do. We need someone in every aspect that looks at these children as children instead of statistics, instead of numbers, instead of, not their problem to solve. Again, I am regularly stunned by the fact that this just continues, that this just and is worse in some pockets of the country versus others, while we all stand here and say that we live in the greatest country on earth. It's stunning to me. How can we
For
be the
sure.
richest country on earth with this happening at the very same time?
Absolutely.
Um, so, what do you say to people who think that you are a good example of what your average foster kid can overcome and become with their lives? Right? Because that happens to me too. People will be like, "Oh, good. Well, good. Foster care. Yay." Like, what do
Yeah,
you say to that? I'm usually like, like, really? You think I am the only person like me that I know? I am the
right.
only one I am the only one in any of the foster kids that I met in all of my travels. Like, I
Yeah,
am re-meeting people who have experienced foster care now that I'm 40, like, that have
yeah.
survived. I don't know anybody that survived that was there with me. So,
I think I
anytime
would put up a fight for that
yeah,
one. Like, I would
right,
probably argue that one, because here's the thing, I feel like with the right skills, we all can make it,
of course. With the right support, we all can make
with
it.
the right support, and so I don't think that I am above anybody else that
Right.
came with me or before me or even after me. I
Yes.
think that I was blessed enough to get the skills to make it to another level,
Right.
um, and so I would argue that point, like, why do
Right.
you feel that way?
Right.
Because I'm where I am because I was able to get the support and
Right.
the things that I need to do,
Right.
the motivation to move
Yes.
forward and be where I am.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't like when people look at me and think, "Oh, well, the system's doing great then.
Yeah,
Oh, well, we don't really need to do that much to change it. Right? Oh, I wonder why people are, oh, it's just, I always get so upset. I'm always like, I seem like the average bear to you. Like, I seem like, and I'm definitely not trying to put myself above people, but I
right,
definitely don't want people thinking that those services are just in place to propel us to average human life. That just
exactly.
isn't the reality. That just that isn't the reality. And I think
There's
that it's
nothing about either one of our experiences that was average or normal.
absolutely, absolutely. Like,
And
I think it would be unfair to suggest that anybody can be who we became, right?
yeah,
Anybody, because those support systems don't exist. Like,
exactly,
we hobbled together, supporters, and got ourselves farther, but that doesn't mean your average person dealing with the amount of trauma that we're dealing with could do that. And I think it's
exactly.
completely unfair to assume that, like, oh, well, just only the exceptional make it and that's fine with us. Like that.
Yeah,
I can't live like that.
I
I
agree.
can't be used as an example for that.
Yeah, I don't think that I'm the example. Am I extraordinary? Yeah, because 'cause I'm
Yes.
me.
Yes.
But
The answer to
but
that is yes.
I definitely I'm not the poster child.
Yes,
Everybody has their own
exactly.
experience, but
Yes.
I think that with support, with your building your own family, you can make it through just like me and I did.
Yes. 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 That's a great point. By building your own family. That's exactly right. I tell people a lot that getting out of the system and creating your own made family
Mhm.
is one of the ways that you survive, one of the ways that you build how you build community is going to be one of the things that changes your life for the better. Maybe you
Absolutely.
ended up in a trash situation like I was in, maybe you were in maybe you were going back and forth in and out of care. Either way, the thing that is going to be the most impactful to your ability to survive is going to be how you build community.
Mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm.
Yep. So I don't want to speak for you. What do you think was the biggest factor in your ability to survive?
Mm. So I think my situation was a little different. Um, And that being that I ended up having a lot of contact with my birth family
Yeah.
that helped me push to the end. So
Yeah.
my journey in foster care ended at 12. And
Mm.
so I went back home. It was not an easy ride at all. We ended up homeless a couple times.
Mm.
It it wasn't easy.
Right.
Um, but I think that having my family, my brothers are older than me.
Yeah.
We're all 6 years apart. And
Mm.
so yeah, so, I'm in the foster care system fighting for my life, and they're teenagers. And
Teenagers,
so they're
right.
like,
Yeah.
"You're gonna make it through. We're gonna get through this."
Yeah.
So that was very beneficial. But I also think that after my abusive foster home, I did have a really good foster home where, you know, my foster mom did what she could.
Mm.
And
Good.
you could tell she was fighting for me on the back end, even though I didn't necessarily see it, and I was
Mhm.
still constantly fighting, um,
Mm.
literally and
Literally and figuratively, yes.
not that person anymore. But
It's a process. We're all in process.
process. We elevated. But you
Right.
could tell she was
Now I
fighting on
talk
the
like
back
this, I
end.
don't fight anymore.
You could tell she was fighting for me on the back end though. Um, it was in her home, which she was my last foster home. So I was in fault 4,
Mm.
my last foster home. But it was at her home where I got the phone call that I could never speak to my mom again. And I had to eliminate contact with my brother as well.
That's so hard.
Yeah.
That's
And
so
so
hard.
she was like, "Yeah, they're telling you this, but don't worry about it. I got you." And I'm
Oh,
like, "I don't know what that means, but I'm just gonna have faith that things will
yeah.
work out."
Right? All you can do.
Yeah.
All you can do.
So I would say it was a mixture between still having contact with my family, and so I wasn't as removed towards the end,
Mm.
and having that last foster mom go
Mm.
to bat for me for sure.
Mm. That's awesome. I mean, we're all kind of in foster care, we're all kind of beholden to the largesse of whoever we are placed with. And if
Mhm.
that is a person that is doing it for the right reasons because they want to support, a particular child or support kids in care, it has the exact same impact as like a great teacher would have. And exactly on the opposite end, if you have somebody that's out there to do you harm, a lot of times that can be the thing that flushes your life and will keep you bound forever.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that that's anytime somebody's had a really good foster home, I'm always like either quietly grateful or out loud grateful if
Yeah.
they're right there. I always thank people who have done foster care and like their kids are doing well and stuff. I'm always so grateful
And I
to.
had a mixture of both. Like,
Yeah,
I had
same.
really bad
Yeah,
homes,
yeah,
like, I
yes.
probably could have died in one,
You should write a book.
literally.
Yeah. Have you thought about writing a book about it? It's very cathartic.
One day.
Wow,
I wanna get the
I'll
records, though.
I'll be here.
Did you get your records to write your book?
No, I have, not quite eidetic memory, but I have, so I remembered the dialogue and sort of all of
Mm,
the situations, and I started off journaling, right? Like I started off like I was tired of people being like, "Oh, you should journal," da, da. And I'm like, like that's not gonna do anything. I got real problems, fish, like
yeah,
But I think once I started writing the story down, I didn't have to obsessively remember it as much anymore. Like I didn't have to like lie awake at night remembering it so like I wouldn't forget and I wouldn't lose it and I wouldn't like I was scorekeeping. I was basically just like, "Oh, and then there was that time that that person did this and they said," you know what I mean? And
yeah,
it was painful and it was harmful that I was doing this to myself. So I started writing the stories down and suddenly it was changing everything in my life because I was realizing that certain stories that I was remembering in a very sort of disconnected way, suddenly I was able to sort of see them chronologically. And then you could sort of see how a situation is being impacted by what else you were going through in your life at that time. And then suddenly you're just like, oh, wait a minute.
Mhm.
And then suddenly you're not seeing things through the eyes of people who are abusing you or hurting you or intending to do you harm. You're seeing them in a much more, you sort of taking a 10,000-foot view of everything that's happening. And then you sort of factor in your different lenses. Like, I'm a mother now. I have a daughter that looks exactly like I looked. And I'm looking at her and I'm just like, I am going to eat everyone, like, and
Sure.
then you just, and then by the time you're done with it, you're not holding it in your body anymore. you
Yeah, for
know
sure.
and so if somebody had said to me at the beginning, instead of just being like, oh, you should journal, da, 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 I would be, instead, if they said, die, this thing is sitting in your heart, just eating up your energy. If you write it down and take it out, you can put it away and like not have to breathe it in every single moment of your life, right? Maybe I would
Absolutely.
have taken that a little bit more seriously.
Absolutely. Journaling is such a good idea to just get all of that
Yes.
trauma out
Yeah.
because I don't think people realize how often we do replay these events that happen to us in our life.
Yeah.
I didn't journal, but I was, well, I didn't journal on purpose. Let me put it that way. So I feel like I really worked through everything that happened to me in school. So a lot of
I
my
bet.
master's level papers were
Mhm.
about my experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get why. You worked it out in a very different way. Actually, still very outside your body, still
Mhm,
very using your brain to do it. I like it. You know what?
mhm.
I should have, but you know what? I like it. That's a very that would have helped me survive as well. I see how you did it that way. So, oh my god, I'm running out of time here. So, I don't want to eat your entire life. I know you still got to pack. Um, what do you say to foster kids that you interact with now who reach out to you now today as an adult?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said earlier is I just remind them that this is just a temporary situation,
Yes.
and after 18 or whenever they exit out the system,
Mm,
they can create a whole different life. It doesn't
yes.
have to be what it is now. And
Yes.
I really push that narrative that you
Okay.
can create whatever life you want. Yes, it's going to be hard initially, but once
Mhm.
you get in the groove of learning how to take care of yourself properly,
Mhm.
learning how to make money properly,
Mhm.
learning how to manage your money, right? And all the
Mhm.
resources that could be available to you, things will get easier
Yes.
and you'll get to love and learn yourself
Right.
and the things that happen to you, yeah, it's going to be there, because
Mhm.
most of the time, realistically, a lot of these people that we came in contact with who said all these negative things to us,
Mhm.
they're still within eyes view. But
Mhm.
guess what? They're watching you, and
Mhm.
once you prove them wrong that you can do whatever you want to do,
Oh my god.
they're going to eat every word.
Oh my god, it's the best. Y'all, if you can, oh my god, prove them wrong. I swear to you, let the rage drive you. Like, I'm not
Mhm,
saying fill yourself with hate. I'm not saying be angry every day. I'm not saying do push-ups remembering how much you hate people. Like, I'm saying let those feelings drive you to where you are going. Because I'm telling you right now, there is nothing like looking back and seeing those people are all still mired in the crab bucket, and there you go, selling your book and all the other stuff that you
mhm.
do, like I'm doing. Oh my God. I wake up, I just smile. I get out of bed and I'm smiling. I'm just like, oh, so good. Oh, the tears of people who have fallen beneath my feet. I'm kidding. No, but not really. Seriously. Just
They're watching.
yeah, they're
They're
watching.
always
They're
watching.
watching. They stayed where they are,
Mhm,
and you are teaching them that they were not only wrong about you, but wrong about themselves, right?
mhm.
Like wrong about themselves in relationship to you. And I think that that is very cool. So if that helps you, if you're a petty person a little bit on the inside, like you got a little petty salt, I got a little petty salt, and that's actually, it's actually okay. Anger is spiritual too sometimes. If it drives you to save yourself, anger can be spiritual too. All right. So, Before I let you go, what's next for you?
So, what's next for me? I am in my doctoral program. It ends in
Yes.
August of 2024. I have the podcast Conversations with T, which, by the
Yes.
way, guys, episode goes live right after this. Go over to
Yes.
YouTube and see that. Calliope's Corner on YouTube. And then I am now a licensed supervisor, and so I'll be
Woo!
taking on social work social workers who are working towards clinical licensure in January. And then I also have been taking on mentors of social work. So if you find yourself wanting to leave the field for whatever reason, hit me up so we can talk about that and I can redirect you because you came here for a reason, and it's if you chose to do social work, it was your calling. No one purposely choose social work without a
Social work
reason or a
chooses
you.
you. Yes. God, I'm
So let's talk about
obsessed
it.
because you are another person that is being the person that she needed when she was a kid, and I am so proud of you. That is so awesome. Way to take it and turn it into your strength. I think that good for you. That is so
Thank you
awesome. That is
guys.
so awesome. All right. So I'd like to thank my amazing guest, Tiana Charles, for joining us here today and for all of her work making a path for those that come after her and holding the ladder to help people climb out of the system and into healing. I love it. You are awesome. And if you loved this conversation, you heard her talk about it, don't forget to head over to YouTube and follow Conversations with T to listen to the rest of our talk on her podcast, which is streaming right now. So, as we wrap our fifth Indomitable Conversation session, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each one of you for joining us here today. Your presence have made this conversation truly impactful. Our commitment to reforming the foster care system remains steadfast, and I hope today's discussion has further inspired you to be part of this crucial mission. The stories we've heard so far remind us of the remarkable strength that resides within those who have experienced the foster care system. Now, because this is our last scheduled session of Indomitable Conversations, and because the fight for justice is never over, I'm excited to announce that I am starting a podcast next month to interview all of my amazing friends with indomitable stories so they can share their lessons and hopefully help all of us heal and become indomitable. So if you have a story to share, reach out to any of my social handles. I would love to have you. And of course, if you haven't already, please consider getting a copy of Indomitable, a foster care story from your favorite bookstore to delve deeper. I love it, to delve deeper into the stories that have shaped this series and contribute to our collective goal of raising awareness to improve the foster care system. And if you really want to make sure the book gets into everyone's hands, please call your favorite bookstore and make sure they have it in stock because that would really help a girl out. So thank you again to Tiana Charles for her amazing work and to all of y'all for your continued dedication to the cause. I look forward to having all of y'all back for Indomitable Conversations podcast next month. And remember, together we are truly indomitable. Take care.